What I'm seeing in the States right now is that, like, neighborhoods have these sets of rules for people who come over. Like, you have to mow your lawn, you have to keep all the trees nice, this sort of thing. Probably if we try to be practical and base this sort of, people living close to each other on different set of rules, this can work out. Or you think it's still too complicated to actually do it in practice?
I couldn't even possibly think of that different set of rules. I mean, the rules we have in this community, these are just very basic rules like um, uh, you can't make any exterior changes in the house without the approval of the architectural committee because we want this community to look like it looks, which is nice. Um, that's okay. It's not a problem. The architecture committee is not a bunch of controllers. They don't mind as long as it looks nice.
But again, people follow these rules. In Russia, for example, you build this fence, and your fence looks any way you want it. It can be 3 meters high, it can be 1 meter high, you can have no fence at
It's a
all.
concept of master planning. Master planning is done by people who are, shall we say, more evolved in their architectural capacities. The concept that everybody can build anything they want creates patchwork and quilt work. In Russia, that's working because these outside areas really don't have any government. It's all just land which people are buying, and they are capable of doing anything they want there. This kind of community that we're in here was created before it was built. So a developer came in, chalked out a plot of land that they bought, made a master plan of it so that the roads worked, the sewage worked, the electricity worked, and so on. There you have all these septic tanks. Now, again, it's not sustainable. The more people you have with all these septic tanks, especially if your water sources are coming from under the ground, you're going to pollute your water sources eventually. So you're going to need to do something about it. And that's why they always move to major sewage systems. But it's much better to do it before you build the road. Otherwise, you have to dig up the whole place to do that. It's enormous expense also. It's a question of understanding the way communities develop. Yet at the same time, that requires capitalization. You don't really have that yet. Maybe somebody's starting to do it now and then, but really that's not the rule there, that's the exception. In America, you have both things. You have people living on the outskirts where it really doesn't matter what they have or don't have because nobody's really affected by it. But there are places where people are affected. And the rule is if you affect or impact others in a negative way, and that cannot be controlled, then some other authority has to come in and regulate that for the sake of peace in society. So the regulating authorities is to minimize the negative impact we have on each other in particular locations. So any kind of a community that would be developed would have to have such a kind of a regulative authority. And when it comes right down to it, that's not much different than any town or village or city you have nowadays. So I don't really see the stage in between a completely regulated community on an idealistic structure to what we have nowadays. And there are subsets within a government, which is like our community association or a cooperative association in an apartment building. It's where people have figured out that this is a good thing and you can join it or not. It's up to you. I don't really see the in-between. Maybe we have to create some kind of new and really radically different way of seeing community, but I'm not sure how that would be. All I would understand is you take what you've already got and you just make it more evolved. Like here in Gainesville, the utility company is very open to giving rebates and incentives to installing alternative energy systems to reduce their burden because it's in their economic interest to do so. Because the more you use electricity, the more they have to have facility. For them to redo or expand their facility costs so much money. It's cheaper for them and more economically beneficial to have you reduce your energy usage and develop alternative ways to get energy. So it's in their interest that you should do this. And at the same time, it's good for the environment, it's good for you, it's good for everybody. So they're seeing it more holistically. And that's good. And they're trying to make master plans for the roads, because we have this enormous traffic problem at certain times of the day, because the whole city has moved to the west, and yet the roads weren't there, never were there. So they have to develop that. They have to develop ways to get from the west to the east, to the south, to the north. So master planning is a huge issue. But because things are already there, fixing it now is very difficult. And that is your problem in Russia. That because you make patches, to fix it is very difficult unless the government comes in and says, now we're going to knock down your house, your house, your house, and to make a road. Or we're going to cut your farm in half. Or this is what ultimately has to be done at one point when you have patchwork development. Or cities just have to be, sections of the city have to be just torn down and started all over again. You know, in New York City, Brooklyn was pretty, I would say, unstructured, not a very nice place in many respects, but because of the economic potential of it, they just was knocking down, building up, knocking down, building up, knocking down, building up, and the borough, which used to be considered to be lower class, is becoming very nice in many respects. So master planning is essential. I think everybody should have a master plan of their life. Every family should have a master plan. We're talking about architecturally, health-wise, economically, educationally, occupationally, artistically, creatively. Master plans are required. You have to sit down and make a plan so that you don't end up walking all over yourself. That's sustainability Sustainability depends on such kind of planning. But to do that, you need some kind of education. You have to know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, you have no training or education, you wouldn't be able to make a master plan, because master planning is a science in itself. You have to consider everything. When you're going to build a community, you have to consider sewage, water supply, utilities. You have to consider communications in the sense of roads and even telephones or internet or whatever. You have to consider proximity to shops. You have to consider parks. You have to consider beautiful arrangements, making them around a city center where people can walk to things, where they don't depend on cars, because when they depend on cars, you got traffic and you got parking and you got problems and you got pollution. So all of these master plan, I've given only a few, considerations are essential for any development. Now, so far we've talked about a lot of things, and today they're very practical things. We really haven't touched upon spirituality at all. But I think that's not so. I think every single thing I've spoken about today is a spiritual issue, because I don't feel it's right to make this distinction that how you live and the structure of how you live is unrelated to your spirituality. So I don't believe that you just have this whatever life and you go to church. I don't think that's spiritual at all. I mean, it may be spiritual when you go to church, but I mean to say that's not spirituality in the sense that I'm talking about. I'm talking about it in the sense that every choice you make, again, I'm being. So my choices of doing have to follow the being. And if I'm aware of my being, how can I choose to do something which is unsustainable? Because being is sustainable. Being is sustainable. It wants to have sustainability around it. We want to live forever in our youthful, healthy, happy state, because that's what our being is. So when we try to move into doing, if our doing creates disease, destruction, chaos, incompatible situations, things that break down and so on, fights, wars, or whatever, the doing is incompatible with being, and it affects us spiritually. It's spiritual discipline to have doing as following being. Discipline is not, in my opinion, relevant nowadays to simply sit in a cave and meditate for 100 years, or to just simply do austerities and beat yourself, or to just simply pray all day. All these things are fine, don't get me wrong. I think it's great, but discipline, in the sense that I'm talking about in my idea of realistic being, which is the real thing, it's the only real thing, my being. That sounds quite opposite. And the fact is the discipline is the doing. That the doing should follow the being. So my doing should be compatible with my being. The communities I create, the work that I do, the creativity that is there. Creativity as an expression, work as I do, as an expression of my being. If I'm forced to work in a way which is incompatible with my being, it doesn't work. My family should be as an expression of my being. My economic basis should be that way too. Everything should be that way. My world, my environment, my healthy air, my healthy water, my everything. It's a sustainable representation of being. And therefore, all of this is related to the core of essence, of being, of people, of humanity. And in this we share it together. We share this world with its environment. We share peace. We share our exchanges. And if one country is exploiting another, there's going to be consequences to it. Just as when I pollute the air, consequences to it. Exploiting other countries, consequences to it. Exploiting other people economically, consequences to it. Exploiting your husband or wife, consequences to it. Exploiting your children, consequences to it. Whatever you exploit, whatever it is, wherever it is, if you're only considering your own interest and not considering the interest of others, there are consequences to that. It creates a breakdown of society, a breakdown of economics. The shift that's happening nowadays is also fueled by breakdown of economics, breakdown of society, breakdown of that which used to work, which no longer works. And that's forcing us to change. And the breakdown is there because selfishness, individual or group, exploits others without the consideration that there's only one of us. What I do to you affects me directly. And therefore, my discipline is to, even a Christian saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. A very simple mirror principle that's so relevant and will always be relevant. Understand the pain of others. If I feel pain, they feel pain. If I get cut, I feel pain. They get cut, they feel pain. If I am cheated, I feel pain. If I cheat others, there is pain involved. And even if I don't feel their pain directly, I'm directly affected by their pain in one way or another. I can get really into the depths of how I'm affected, that energetic exchange. Just like when you cheat others, it creates a rolling cycle, and you pay for it at one point or another. And it causes a degradation in your consciousness. It causes you to lose your integrity of being as you become something else, and you lose connection to the self. You lose what you are. There's a saying, again, a Christian saying, very interesting. What benefit is there to someone who gains the whole world but loses their soul? And that really speaks about when the individual is lost by the action, when the being is lost in the doing. And discipline is to keep the two always linked, so that doing is always the manifestation of being. And therefore, everything we've spoken about, marriage and economics and community and so on, is a spiritual discipline that's done at every moment, right now. Right now is the only time I have to choose how my doing is a reflection of my being, because only right now exists. I may make a master plan so that my choice of what to do now falls into a recognizable pattern. Can you imagine a life without future or past, and everything you did right now could be anything? Well, you could act chaotically. It wouldn't matter to you. Some people have that problem. The next step in life doesn't matter to them because it doesn't mean anything. Whatever means something is right now. It's the ultimate quintessential existentialist. But people are not like that who are in a healthy state. We understand. I have been so in the past. It has created situations that I may not like in the present. Therefore, I shall plan to do things properly in such a way that I will always have a present which I'm happy with. And this way, when you see that principle in a holistic spiritual way, in terms of the discipline of doing, following, being, you'll be able to create your momentary decisions in the right now in such a way that you could live your life properly. And at the end of life, you can honestly say, I always did what I thought was right at the moment I did it. And maybe it didn't work out the way I thought it would, but that's not under my control. Under my control only is the decision I make right now. That's also a Vedic principle. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. You don't have a right to the results of your acts because they haven't manifested yet. But you do have a right to what you do right now. Now, sometimes people read that statement and they say, that means you can work now, but when you get the result of your work, you don't own it. Like, I work and I get money, but the money's not really yours. That's a misunderstanding of what it really means. What it really means is you work now because that's all you can do, to make choices right now. You don't own the future. You don't own the results of this, because even you work with the best intentions, what happens in the future may be totally different than what you think. But don't worry about that, because that's not yours to own. There's so many factors linked together. What's yours to own is only the choice you make right now, to work, to act, to create an event. This is the discipline, to act right now from that being that you are. That's the discipline. To make a compatible choice of doing from what you are right now.
If we are talking about like a bigger role of individuals rather than society nowadays, some people can confuse this with bigger importance of the self and like your egoistic desires or your things which you want for yourself or things which you like, things which you are.
Well, what do you need as a self, as being? What do you need? What does being need?
That's what I'm talking about. With the being, as you describe it, there is no selfishness in this. But because there is no need to, to
obtain.
Goods
things don't have value to being.
But even, I think if we talk about like subtler things like feelings, like love or something, I think there really in this being, there can't be any desire to possess what you love or to be jealous of this. Like, how does this work? Because a lot of people, they...
Wait, you're in a different point right now. You're mixing love and relationship and need to possess with a being and possessing things. let's separate it just for a second. A being does not need anything. A being simply is. Yet, what is it that makes a being engage in act? Well, we have desires. Okay, let's say we don't have a body. How does that desire manifest? Let's put that aside for a second. But we do have a body. Let's be practical. And this body has needs. Contrary to the being, that being without need, body has needs. Now, being's in a situation. It's connected to body. This situation has created a new circumstance for being. It has to deal with it because this body is intimately connected to being. It's the vehicle, the tool through which, the instrument through which being expresses and acts. Yet, body needs clothes. You can't run around naked all day. Besides from the fact that it would be pretty gross. The other, some people might think it's cool for a while, but ultimately be pretty gross. And besides the fact you'd freeze to death or you'd all get sunburned and die or whatever might happen, you need clothes. Okay, you have to have clothes. So how should the clothes look? Oh, for example, I won't wear black. I really can't take black on me. There are other colors I can't stand. I like certain colors. I like greens. I like yellows, the kind of tannish, reddish, orangish, kind of pastels. I like pastels. So I'll usually choose clothes that fit my mood in the morning. I feel like this. Those colors fit me. All right, I like that. I like to be green today or whatever. So I have a need according to my feeling. My feeling is so, my expression of feeling manifests in the clothes I wear, like this. So my being and my feeling create a certain kind of clothes. Similar with food. Yet, there's the tongue. My tongue, this chemical composition there, this biochemical creation, this living cellular organism that is connected to nerves which go to my brain or my body. I cannot eat foods which are sour. If it's sour, it's just like, it goes through me like a knife. It's like, put sour in it goes like a knife through the top of my head. It's just like, oh, that's actually how I feel. So this tongue is different than my wife who eats sour and goes, wow, that's so good. When I watch her eat the sour thing, I go, whew. That's how much I hate sour things, because it's my constitutional nature. In Ayurveda, I'm a pure pitta, so pitta can't tolerate sour. So, all right, this creates needs for foods that are not sour. Similarly, I need glasses to see. So body creates needs. Being doesn't create needs. Now let's get to love. Interesting. People need people. It's Barbara Streisand. People who need people. The luckiest people. And well, it's not just lucky. Everybody needs people. We need people in a million ways. We need people to assist us in work. We need people to support us. We need people to lift us off the street when we fall on it. We need people. We need parents when we're young. We need parents all the time, basically. We need to have people. And amongst that group of needs is this one need to have intimate, loving connections. Now, why is that? Now, if you examine that need is not necessarily born of body. That's actually an expression of being. Ultimately. Because being, the part of the nature of being is love. That love of self, that love of others. What is love really? Very hard to define with words or put your finger on it. You can define how love expresses itself. You can define, to some extent, the effect of love. You can define the decisions made out of love. But what that love is, you can really only say it's that being which I am. I am love. But I am being better, because being includes that love. Being includes that now, that existence, that awareness, that various forms of desire to express that being. And to have connection with other people, especially when it's very intimate, expands the love of the individual being. In other words, the one being and the one being come together to become another one being, or an us. The two become one as an us. So this usness that we create in love, this intimate connection in love, it amplifies what I already am. Being and being connect as being a new being, us, that amplifies love. And when this not connected, we feel something's missing. Many people have written about splitting of the soul some time back, and one wonders what time, and the reuniting of it, or the find the soul mate, or the second half, or the whatever you want to call it, twin souls and so on. Very interesting concepts. Also, there's the idea of the male and female parts of us, which need to come into balance. And when the male and female parts come into balance, we're able to find our twin soul. Because if male and female are out of balance, our desire is, let's say if the male is very developed, the female is not developed, is to find the female to fill that up, to balance. Because the nature of being is to be in balance. So when the male and female aspects are out of balance, we try to find some other way to put them in balance. So we try to look for other persons to assist us to do it. But that's not very good for relationship, because then we end up having one out of balance person together with another out of balance person who, when trying to make the us, have a certain amount of parasitic or exploitative ideals there. I need you to complete me. Now, that's practical reality, and there's nothing much you can do about it, unless you can somehow or another create this balance between the male and female within you. When you do that, you will be able to reunite with your twin soul, or whatever you call it. Because then when the usness is created, it's not created out of need. It's created out of the desire to be one, which is sustainable because of the balance. Otherwise, you're trying to fill up, and that doesn't work. There's exploitation involved in that. A need. I'm needy. I need. Therefore, the perfection comes when the balance is there, to find another whose balance is there. And if there really is such a thing as twin souls, when one comes to this balance, the synchronicity of things, like the monkeys with the beat in the water, with the synchronicity of things, empowers the other to come to that balance. So then when they come together, the balance perfectly manifests as this us, this union, this oneness. That's actually the epitome of love, the optimal form of love. And that's why I divided it up. Because when you speak of love in relationship to need, you're not really speaking about love. You're speaking about something else. Now, I know that often we spiritualists talk about male and female getting together as purely a product of lust, lusty desire. But I also know many couples who are together whose lusty desire is long gone. Because after all, sex isn't eternal. And the lust of sex isn't eternal. Yet, they're in such a compatible relationship, it's not the major factor anymore. Now, in reality, as soon as you speak about need, whether it be for sex or it be for anything, fulfilling of the male-female balance, you're talking about a situation which is, to some extent or another, based on need, desire, fulfilling of desire, and mutual exploitation. I know the word is not particularly relevant here. Maybe mutual beneficial activities where you benefit each other. It's a win-win situation. Yet, to a certain extent, there's business involved. That I give you what you need, you give me what I need. And if I give you what you need, but you don't give me what I need, the business relationship breaks down and divorce might take place. But when you talk about love, it is devoid of exploitation. It is devoid of need. It is there because it's simply there. And the balance of it is manifested in this usness, or the union of two balanced personalities. This is what everybody really is looking for when they speak about love. It's this balance. It's this union, this usness, where the interests of the lover and beloved become one. This is possible amongst individual beings. So far, mainly this has been discussed in terms of the individual trying to come to that communion with God. Whereas we develop this communion with God as this usness, where our interests and the interests of God become one. Because we don't need anything. Therefore, spirituality has been defined in terms of not needing anything, not wanting anything, not lamenting about anything. Simply having the spiritual nature, and thus, this is very important, thus, underline it 10 times, thus becoming qualified to connect with God, because God's already in that situation. So unless you get to that situation, you can't connect to God. And when you are in that situation, you can connect to God in this perfect union. Now that's fine, except they always say that the prerequisite to do that is to never have any need from anyone else in this world, and therefore no connections to anyone in this world. Anyone who is connected to God in that way will have no connections to others in this union with others, especially male to female, because that implies to them this need, this desire, this lust, and so on, which they're trying to get rid of so they can become connected to God. I disagree. I agree with the connection to God, 100%. However, being in that balanced situation does not mean you can't find that with other living beings, including male and female. It's the question of having the balance within yourself and coming together with others who are balanced. Even if you're not together with others who are balanced, it will not throw you out of your balance. Because if you're situated in your being and you are connected with the Supreme, connection with other is not a detriment in your life. So this connection, this union of love is possible, desirable, and even wonderful in this world as well. That's why it's interesting. You have so many philosophies where when you're back in heaven, whatever that heaven may be, there's in Vaikuntha, in the Vedic thing, there's couples. Even in other places, there's always this coupling going on. But there's some places where no, that's not allowed. And that's to a large extent limiting. Maybe someone might not think it's limiting, or might be perfectly happy with such things. Or they may even expand, for example, in the Vedic thing, God into so many expansions that everybody has that relationship with God. That's okay too. But this fulfillment is very interesting. This connection, I feel, is very interesting. This usness is very interesting. And this twin soul, whatever meeting, I think is perfectly compatible with connection with God. I know that's a little radical to say all that, but that's how I feel.
But if we talk about like traditional religions, let's say not in the matter of people who, become priests or go to live in a temple or in a cave somewhere or something. If we talk about regular people in regular traditional religions, those people, nobody really tells them, well, it's not like they are, how can I put it? Well, basically they are asking God for something, or they are lamenting about something, and it's never considered to be a bad thing. It's like this needy relationship with God is not something considered to be bad or inappropriate. Like people go to church all the time to ask for something.
But then you're thinking of God the Father.
Oh, okay.
The Father supplies. That's not really a selfless relationship. You're not really talking about love in a very elevated form. It's God the supplier, man the requirer. It's a reflection of our active principle in the world we live in now. I need, therefore I ask. And God gives, because God's the Father. I don't think that's relevant to what I've been saying at all today. It's just some idea that people are using. I think what's happening here is that we're redefining religion. We're redefining theology totally.
Usually when people start like digging into something or trying to define some things, they're using terms and definitions while they're talking without this core basis. And
of what
this
they
is
mean.
What you are doing right now.
Exactly.
This
redefining words and concepts which everyone took for granted, but which was not relevant to reality. It's this redefinition that I'm so happy about, because that's the most important thing there is, to actually understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and this process of redefining of everything is like the core process of this shift. Then everything which used to be taken for granted
is defined in a new sense. Absolutely. Yeah, we return continually to the same things. It's just that we are now, it's like a spiral, It was this way and then it's going this way. That's the dimensionality of a shift. It's a dimensional shift, because for a long time things were in a certain kind of dimension, and then they're moving out of that dimension. So things move in all ways now. It's no longer restricted, and that's creating pretty amazing situations. Not only that, but I think it's giving the opportunity to evolve towards what everybody always wanted to evolve to anyway. They all wanted to get to God. They all wanted to really, ultimately, those who are spiritualists, they want to get that connection. They want to get the love. They want to get the bliss. They want to get the eternality and all that jazz, the knowledge. But it's being stuck in these previous kinds of three-dimensional, however you want to say, this restricted dimension, only the very most fortunate yet skillful persons could find their way to that connection, because they could never do it through these restricted ways. They had to somehow see it in another dimension and find their way there. But when they spoke back to us, we couldn't catch it because it was not in our dimension. So therefore, nowadays, what I'm trying to do, and this has been no easy task, and when people speak about it in disrespectful terms, I just kick it away, because in reality, what I'm trying to do is take that dimension where they end up and bring it there so that everybody has facility to live in that dimension. So I'm helping you shift your dimension away from the restriction to an unrestricted dimensional capacity so that you can feel it, experience it, see it in the exact same way those persons who got there do. And it's working now. Now it's actually possible. And that is a new spirituality format. I suppose others have done it too. I'm not saying it's not already done. I'm just saying that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's like with that recording development. No matter how many people did it, it's the most important who, did it for the humanity, who got famous for it, who got patent for it.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people do the same thing now out of synchronicity, but it's important that these things happen and it will get through to...
Yeah, I don't really care to get a patent. I mean, I don't want to get on an airplane and fly anywhere. I'm so happy that we're doing it right here. I can't fly very much. You know how this swelling thing, it gets insane on the airplane. By the time I arrive, I'm practically so, I can't breathe. I can't think. I don't like to fly. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't see any reason to go anywhere. If I can do this now in this format, that's great. I mean, after all, in my broadcast, people are seeing me in a video. As far as they're concerned, I could be a tape recording. They wouldn't know the difference. No one would know the difference.
If we are talking about like real connecting, it doesn't happen in time and space. So the connection between people which happens doesn't require you to be online during broadcast for those people to connect to your ideas or to you.
I don't know. It might be that there's something to it, that this live energy, because I think it's like this. I don't want to disagree with what you're saying, because what you're saying has relevance too, but I think it's like this, that when I'm sitting here putting my energy into that broadcast, it's going into the camera, but it's not that they're receiving it from the camera. They're receiving it, let's say this is me in the camera and they're over there, they're receiving it this way. You see what I'm saying? Directly. And they're seeing me and connecting to me. It's just like when you see the deities, for instance, and you're connecting with God. It's a question of having some stimulus, so that for instance, that there's this person sitting here who's speaking to me and wants to connect to me, and I want to connect to them. Because in your ordinary life, you don't think like that. You just think, oh, there's this person over there or something. And if you want to connect to them, maybe that person doesn't want to connect to you, so it's not so strong. But here I am, specifically connecting, specifically working, concerned, caring about you in that camera, in this, what you're watching. I'm thinking about you watching me, and you're watching me, thinking about me, speaking to you. And therefore we're connecting etherically through that stimulus. So it's actually very important. That's what people miss. And that's what you never get in a video. Because in a video, I may be sleeping while you're watching the video, no connection. And therefore, actually, live broadcast has value to these people because they're sharing live. I'll do it again, but I need to do this now. It's very, very important for me, what you're doing. What you're doing right now by videoing this is very, very important for me, because I don't know, I have this feeling, and I may be crazy, that this transformation of spirituality takes this whole New Age thing, which people feel is somehow wishy-washy, fluff, blah, and putting it directly as the format for spiritual realization, which ends up with connection to the Supreme. I haven't talking about Radha and Krishna and things like that, because we have to talk about the male and female, which may be another interview, perhaps on Saturday, or for me, you really want to know the whole thing for me is this connection to Radha and Krishna. This connection to the deities I have in there. Lord Shiva, their family, the whole thing. This is my connection. This is my basis. I'm sitting here, yet, there's this direct connection and communication. I just spoke about a philosophical point in Bhagavad Gita which was never expressed before. Do you know that? This philosophical point in the Bhagavad Gita has always been you can't be fruitive.
Yeah.
And that's not what it really means. What it really means is you don't own the future. And that little change, it just hit me so deeply as I was saying it, like, my God. And there are many things like that. Many things like that. And it's redefining so that this connection, my whole point is I've got to gather up all these individuals all over the world and gather them in the right way of seeing their connection to Radha and Krishna. It's like having to work against the entirety of organized religion, the entirety of hierarchical religion, the entirety of all these traditions, cultural traditions, thousands of year old traditions. I'm trying to say it's no longer relevant. Yet, the essence of it all is totally relevant. And why don't you get to the essence? Because that's all you want anyway. I joined Krishna consciousness movement because I wanted love of God and the essence. And I was so burdened all the time by these people, most of whom I couldn't stand. I couldn't stand to be around. They drove me nuts. They weren't educated. They weren't organized. So they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't very smart. They would make decisions which would be contrary to everything they wanted in their lives. Drove me crazy. You better edit this out. And this idea but the idea of love, that this is the way to get the love of God, was fueling me all the time. The methodology doesn't work. It only works for those who find their way through it anyway, despite it. Yet the information is good, the ideas are good, the essence is good. Radha and Krishna are wonderful. Dancing with them is wonderful in all of this. So that's where I want to be. But I don't think I have to go there. I think it's a question of the being there. But people would argue that desire is not enough. You have to be disciplined because you'll always want to do something else. And that's what I'm trying to explain. That it's not a desire. It's an expression of what you already are. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you desire to be, right? Yeah. You're thinking, there's a state which is good to be, so I shall be that way. It's a contradiction. You can't be any way. It's a subtle, little tiny thing. Understand? The whole basis of exactly what you are saying is to be another way than what you are now. That's the whole basis of all spirituality and religion. To be another way, this good way. And they even say this original way. And this whole idea of becoming original, mm-hmm. It's the contradiction. You can't become original. You can't be another way. You can only be what you are. And to be what you are, you have to stop trying to be something else. And stopping is easy. It's passive.
I kind of disagree with you there.
I know you disagree because you could do things. You're going to disagree by doing. If I get drunk, I'm not being what I am, right? Okay, sure. Now you're going to say, stop drinking. Stop this. Stop that. Don't do this. That's the problem. Because when you think you can be another way, you can therefore say, stop doing this, stop doing that, stop doing this. That's the problem. Because unless you have contact with the being, there's no reason for you to stop. Why would you do it? ultimately. And when you have contact with being, and doing follows being, why would you get drunk and lay on the floor? It would make no sense to you. It's a subtle little thing, yet it's everything. One way is very hard. The other way is the easiest thing in the creation. The easiest thing in the creation is to stop struggling. Stop fighting with yourself. Stop hating yourself. Just accept yourself as you are and stop trying to be anything else. This is easy. And that just requires awareness and a few simple tools of meditation, which we've been going through all, and this understanding. Once you understand it, doing that, which means not doing anything, is easy. But to stop drinking, stop this, stop that, stop the other thing, so you can become this, is an incredible endeavor that takes lifetimes and lifetimes. This is not a very effective technique. This is a very inefficient way to gain spirituality. And much more efficient, stop fighting.